I'm representing Oeconomus, but we are doing this event together with Egmont Institute, so we have representatives from the Belgian Institute as well here. And well, let me start the program, and for that I'll give the welcoming words to Peter Törcsik, President of the Board of Oeconomus Institute.
Thank you, Anton, Minister Bóka, Your Excellencies, members of the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. First of all, allow me to thank you for my fellow colleagues at Oeconomus and the Egmont Institute and the Hungarian House for helping us put this very interesting and important event together. I promise I'll be really brief because I'm a lawyer, I'm not an expert of competitiveness and economy. But what we have experienced and why we have decided with the Egmont Institute to join forces and approach this very important challenge what the European Union faces currently is competitiveness. And just I learned from my very well-educated colleagues that in the past 15 years, the economy has increased in the US 3 times as much as the European Union. And it is a clear sign that there is something which we must do on European level. And unfortunately, in the recent year, having European Parliament elections, also having US elections, which is of course not a part of Europe, but anyway, it's one of the strongest allies of the European Union, and culturally and throughout NATO, we have a very strong impact when the US decides about their future. So my point is that recently, unfortunately, political tensions and political approaches have overshadowed our real challenges. And besides of the war, the other major challenge of the European Union is the lack of competitiveness. The good thing is that some of the leaders of the European Union, leaders of some member states and the Commission understood that there is something which is very important and we have to find joint solutions for that challenges. There was on the table the Letter report, the Draghi report, and now the Hungarian presidency put together a unanimous Budapest Declaration, which has also very significant approaches and offers a solution how we should tackle this problem, which will determine in our future when we have a look at on the economies and trade competitiveness on the world stage. And our aim was together with the Egmont Institute to put aside our political differences and the overshadowing political debates and put the spotlight on the professional questions and try to focus how we can jointly find solution answers to our most difficult and most important challenge, which is competitiveness. And that is why, thank you again, Minister Bóka, that you accepted our invitation, because elaborating on the very importance of the Budapest Declaration could be a very strong milestone in the future, how we get back our economic competitiveness and how we can remain as Europe and the European Union a major player on the world economy. So thank you again for accepting our invitation. Thank you again for your presence here, and let me give the floor to Jean-Louis, the leader of Egmont. Thank you again.
Thank you very much for your kind words, and thank you also to our colleagues from Oeconomicus to have associated us with the presentation of this report tonight. Well, I will start by stating that this session could not have been more timely. It's in a way reassuring, because I mean it's a way to say to the audience that they are not going to waste their time for the next 90 minutes. Why is it timely? We are slowly but surely getting to the closure of the Hungarian presidency. And indeed, you said it yourself, since the very beginning, competitiveness was set as the priority of the Hungarian presidency. So, in a way, the time has come to assess what has been achieved and to look at it with an expert view, which is going to be facilitated by the excellent quality of the report, which is the background of our discussion tonight, and that will be presented to us soon by Professor Pastor. It's timely also because the EU is now coming at the end of a long transition, which started in April when the European Parliament prepared itself for the next European election. We had to go through a series of stages and phases, the European election themselves, the more or less easy way or easy road leading to the appointment of the new Commission. The new team was sworn in last weekend. Not to mention, of course, the transition at the European Council level with the new president taking office also on the 1st of December. So that means that now at EU level, the new team is in place. And that is that new team that will have to meet the competitiveness challenge. Like you, I'm a lawyer. That means that I'm not an expert in competitiveness either, but I have the feeling that we are all going to become very quickly competitiveness experts during at least those involved in EU affairs during the months and years to come. One last word, one last reason why it is a timely event, and you refer to it also, the outcome of the American election. We have in front of us an administration which is extremely clear about its program, its intention, and its headline goals. It's high time now for the EU to get its act together, to enter into an adult conversation with this new administration, and to, be able to have a deal on a, I would say, to trade with them on quite an equal footing. For that purpose, there are two conditions. The first one is that we have to know what we want. We have to know what we want, and we have to know what we want to achieve. And the second one is to indeed make up for the challenge of competitiveness. One of the messages that we're going to hear tonight, and you sketched it yourself, is that we are losing ground. So we have to stop absolutely sliding back. There is not much time to do that. I think that the initiatives announced by the new Commission are promising, but we're going to have to see how and when they will be delivered. And again, the report that we present that will be presented tonight, and the conversation that we're going to have should help us collectively, first of all, to better understand the challenges at stake, and then possibly to identify what the next priorities should be. For that reason, thank you very much for having made that event possible. Thank you very much for the Hungarian House for its outstanding hospitality. And I think that now the time has come, Mr. Minister, to listen to you. Thank you very much.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, I am also a lawyer by profession, so you'll have a chance to listen to three lawyers in a row, which is quite strange at a competitiveness-related event. I always had this discussion with colleagues whether the European higher education institutions produce too many lawyers and not enough engineers, for example. But I have a slightly different opinion, being a lawyer myself, that there is only redundancy when it comes to the number of lawyers if you can substitute one lawyer with another. And you can only do this if the legal position of the lawyers are identical. Then you can substitute them for each other. But this has never been the case, because I never met two lawyers who had identical legal position in any case. So this is theoretically excluded that we have an overproduction of lawyers in Europe, because these lawyers are not replaceable. But being a lawyer and not an expert on economic issues, I will do my best to be as short and as provocative as I can. So I think that first and foremost we have a problem with our European state of mind. And the European state of mind is that we take our relevance for granted. We believe that Europe matters because it has always mattered. And we believe that we have an influence on the global stage because we are Europeans. And we believe that our prosperity comes from the fact that we are Europeans. And I think it's time to change this attitude. We are relevant only if we are powerful in one or many ways, and we have the ability to project this power. And I believe that our prosperity comes from the fact that we are able to create, to produce, to trade, and to finance. So it is time to refocus our efforts on the fundamentals. As I understand from my experience, the writing has been on the wall for quite some time now, that in some areas we are losing our competitive edge, and the reasons for this, again, according to my humble understanding, is not cyclical, but it's structural, and they require action on a European level. The Draghi report that I actually read, the whole report, not just the executive summary, and believe me that this is quite an achievement for a lawyer. So the Draghi report is a very good assessment of the situation and a very good analysis of the root causes. But it is also a fact that we have never been short of good assessments and analysis. What we have fewer or less of is political commitment and political ownership to tackle the issues identified in the Draghi report and a number of other analyses that have come before. The Hungarian presidency of the Council cannot substitute for this commitment and ownership, but we can serve as a catalyst. And in our role as a catalyst for discussions and policy development, the overarching priority of our presidency has been the economic competitiveness of the European Union. This is a priority that is connected to all other priorities of our presidency, and it is a priority that we looked at from a horizontal perspective, not only on certain specific policy areas. The flagship project of the Hungarian presidency has been the adoption of the Budapest Declaration at the informal European Council, surprisingly in Budapest, on the 8th of November. And I would like to say a few words about this declaration. What this declaration contains and achieves, and what this declaration does not contain and does not try to achieve. I think the main message of the declaration is the recognition of the issue and the problem on the highest political level by the leaders, heads of state and the government. It is crucially important to see that the Budapest Declaration does not simply say that leaders have read the Letta and the Draghi report, and the Letta and Draghi report says this and that. The Budapest Declaration underlines the understanding by the leaders of the challenges that we face. By this, the leaders took political ownership of the process, and the leaders promised to return and revisit the issue from time to time and keep providing strategic political guidance to the European institutions. The European institutions are tasked with the responsibility to keep competitiveness-related issues at the focus of their attention and look at this as a horizontal challenge. The declaration highlights a number of policy areas where urgent progress is needed. For example, when it comes to the European defense industry, or when it comes to the single market, or when it comes to the banking and capital market union, which is now called saving and investments union. And also includes specific measures, for example, calling on the Commission to reduce reporting obligation by 25% in the first half of 25, or to come up in the context of a clean industrial deal with ideas how we can reduce energy prices in Europe in order to make industry competitive on a global level. If the European industry pays 2 to 3 times as much for electricity than the American competitors, or 4 to 5 times as much for natural gas than American companies, it's very difficult to speak of competitiveness in any way. But the Budapest Declaration is not a substitute for policy planning and legislation, so it should not be looked at as a policy planning document or a legislative text. This work is still ahead of us, and in the context of this work that is ahead of us, I think we must not repeat the mistakes from the previous institutional cycles. For example, trying to implement climate policy without industrial policy, or neglecting the social and political importance of agriculture. I think that these are lessons from the past 5 years that we have to heed. But we also have to look at the lessons of the past 25 years, not only the past 5 years. And in the past 25 years, I see a lot of good initiatives coming from European institutions, but I also see a long and uninterrupted line of failures. I don't know whether you remember the Lisbon strategy, for example, to make the European Union the most competitive knowledge-based economy by 2010. Or if you look at the Europe 2020, or you look at the Green Deal from the past institutional cycle. So it is important to look at the shortcomings and the deficiencies, and to see why the implementation of these policies failed. And being a Minister of EU Affairs, who is responsible also for institutional relations and the institutions and the institutional structure of the European Union, I would rise to a greater level of abstraction. How is it possible, if we look at our institutions and procedures and the outcome of these strategies in the past 25 years, how is it possible that we keep coming up with strategies that cannot be implemented? Is this possible because these strategies are unrealistic in the first place? Then we must look at the institutions and the decision-making processes that keep producing strategies that are not realistic and cannot be implemented. Or do we come to the conclusion that these strategies were realistic, but for mysterious reasons we could not implement any of them in the past 25 years? And then this again, an issue for procedures, but from the implementations. So my question and the center of my interest is, are these failures somehow inherent? Are these failures somehow coded in our institutions and procedures? And maybe our competitiveness problem is part of a bigger problem that is a problem inherent or coded in our institutions and procedures. And this brings us to the very heart of the European integration, what we expect from these institutions and how these institutions can deliver. I hope that this event today will bring us closer to the answer, not only to the questions of competitiveness, but to the deep underlying questions of European institutions and procedures, and whether in their current format they are able to deliver results for Europe and European citizens. I sincerely apologize for not being able to be or to remain with you until the end of the event, but again, I hope you will understand being a lawyer and being the European Affairs Minister of the rotating presidency of the Council in the final weeks of our presidency. Again, I thank the organizers for making this event a reality, and I also thank the host for providing a magnificent venue for the event. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Minister Bóka. János Bóka, Minister of European Union Affairs of Hungary. And thank you very much for this timely speech, opening speech. And thank you very much, Jean-Louis, again, for the cooperation and for your speech. Thanks for 3 lawyers. Now we'll have an economist, a colleague of mine, Szabolcs Pastor, who is the Director of Research at Oeconomus. And he will present a report conducted by Oeconomus done on diagnosis of the problems of competitiveness and some answers which Hungarian EU presidency came up for in this regard. The report can be read on the website of Oeconomus, so I would encourage you, if you do not know our organization, we are a Hungarian-based think tank dealing with economics and geopolitics. So feel free, we have our reports in Hungarian and English, mostly Hungarian, but you also find English materials. So feel free to check our website, our social media, and you can find that report there as well. So I would like to give the floor to Szabolcs. Please make your presentation. Okay.
Finally, or unfortunately, you can decide, or you will decide whether a lawyer is better than an economist, or exactly the opposite. To be honest, when I studied at different universities, they told me that you will never be given the right answers for the economic problems, but we will tell you whether economists try to mislead you or whether they are telling you the truth. And this is always in my mind. I have a short presentation, but before that, let me read a couple of lines for you. I promise these are going to be like 5 or 6 lines. Without serious, deep and comprehensive reforms, Europe will inexorably decline, both economically and politically. Absent profound change, in 20 years or 30 years, the share of Europe in the world economy will be significantly lower than it is today, and perhaps more important, its political influence will be much trimmed. Europeans seem to be living in a dream that their past splendor and their current prosperity cannot be lost. This is a mistake. And the final sentence, a mere European decline is indeed a serious possibility. You may say that we have a hard copy of the Draghi report. We can tell you that this book I'm going to show you, I mean the cover, was printed almost 20 years ago. It was written by 2 scholars, Alessina and Giavazzi, and the title of the book is The Future of Europe, subtitle Reform or Decline. So we are facing not new problems, but basically old problems. And we are not going to talk about this old book, and I'm not going to talk about the Draghi report. Instead, I'm going to highlight a couple of pressing and under-researched issues, and I will show you, and we, the economist researchers, we will show you why the points of the Budapest Declaration are important. So, I am going to talk about basically some current or recent issues of competitiveness, and we are going to have a clear focus on the Hungarian presidency and the Budapest Declaration. Well, instead of repeating the old stories, with the help of a couple of slides, I want to show you some under-researched weaknesses of the European Union and the European integration. Point number 1. When it comes to stock markets and when it comes to stock market capitalization, Europe and the European countries are secondary players. Look at the share of the United States, for example. We have shallow financial markets. They are very far from deep, and we cannot be surprised when companies at the early stage of growing, after a time, say goodbye to Europe and they say, well, we want to move to the United States. Also, it is not an overstatement to label the European Union as a patent desert. We Europeans are really bad in comparison with some competitors at innovation. We have a little number of patents, and you can see the region's share of global patents published annually in 2 years, 1995 and 2020. China, US, but basically you can browse the country studied and you can make a comparison easily. Well, we are definitely not ahead of our competitors. We may talk about trade and international trade. To be honest, when I studied at university, they told me that the European Union is the #1 trader of the world. At that time, I think that was true. You may have a look at this and you may find out that the European Union gives close to 15% of total goods exports, or it gave 15% of the total goods exports in 2021. You may say that that's a visible percentage. The problem comes when you have a look at this timeline of the European Union share of world exports. Well, in 2002, or basically 20 years ago, we were in a much better position than we are today. And the competitors and our competitors are chasing us. Well, I could continue with a couple of other points. Something else came to my mind when you say that industry and manufacturing is no longer a kind of interesting field for the European Union, and many say that we should focus on business services or industrial services. But when you have a look at the business service trade data, you may find out that in case of the services, this sector plays an ever-increasing role, but when we compare the performance of the European Union and the United States, we may find out that the American companies are much more competitive, and the European Union has been developing a trade deficit in this field, in this sector. So we are focusing on a different sector, which is not really good for the European Union economy. And let me show you in the next part the points and the recommendations of the Budapest Declaration. I'm not going to read these 12 points. Instead, I will highlight and I will talk about some. First of all, it should be mentioned that the Capital Markets Union could give a huge boost for the European integration and for the European economy. Well, our financial markets are not much integrated, and there is a huge potential in making our financial markets deeper, and we should connect our capital markets as well. Basically, reducing the bureaucracy and the administrative burden is an evergreen story, and they mention this issue even in this older book. This is going to be, and this is going to remain on the table. Well, you may browse the other points as well, and if you have a look at point 6, I have bad news for you. 3% is ambitious, I have to say. But when we have a look at what our competitors are doing, we have to say that that is not enough. We should invest more in research and development. 3% will not be enough. And basically, if you want to have a look at the rest, you may find the points which are indeed important, and let's hope that the Budapest Declaration will remain an action plan. We have a fantastic summary of our problems. Letta and Draghi made excellent job when unearthing our important problems, and we at the Oeconomus look at the Budapest Declaration as a good action plan, and we truly hope that things will improve. And we urge improvement just because when we compare, for example, our financial markets, we may find that the financial markets in the European Union are obsolete. Europeans have a kind of old school financing in their minds, and well, this is not really good for the businesses. And well, let's hope that the European Union with clever innovations will not only maintain but improve its competitive advantage in renewable energy, in short, and let's hope that it will give a further boost for the European economies. Well, we at the Oeconomus keep mentioning another sector, and this is the defense industry. Well, there is potential in this, and there is something what I want to highlight. Based on many papers, it is quite clear that technological improvements in this sector usually appear in many other sectors as well. We can talk about the spillover effect, and we can talk about the good impact of military spending, defense spending. And we have a bit of, or well, some may say, much potential in this. I think 2 minutes ago I said that 3% will not be enough. You may have a look at this, and now you can understand why 3% will not be enough. When we invest 3, we may keep the pace with some players, but we will never keep the pace with South Korea, for example. Let me show you a couple of conclusions, then I am going to finish. In order to save a bit of time, I let you browse these points. And let me tell you that our report is available on the internet. And during the roundtable discussion, I will highlight a couple of other points as well. Let me conclude and let me say thanks for your patience and for your participation. Thank you so much, and I will remain available if you have questions later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Szabolcs, for the presentation. And now we'll continue with the roundtable discussion. And for that, I would like to ask the moderator of the roundtable discussion, Jean-Louis Dablower, to introduce the speakers. And yes.
Do we use this microphone?
We have two microphones. So
Okay, very good. Okay, very good. Thank you. Well, I will ask the panelists to join me around the table. So indeed, we have you, Professor Pastor. I mean, you said it yourself. We're going to have the opportunity to hear more from you and let you elaborate in participating in the discussion of some of the findings and hypotheses of your report. Your two interlocutors will be on my right side, Mr. Ernő Schaller-Baross, you are a member of the European Parliament from Hungary, but while chatting with you before the beginning, I understand that you are actually embodying the Austrian-Hungarian history. You are a member of the Committee of the Internal Market and Consumer Protection, as well as the Committee on Constitutional Affairs. By the way, the connection between economy and institution that was raised by the minister is also something on which you might wish to elaborate. And you are, of course, part of the delegation with the United States. Previously, you worked in the Prime Minister's office in Hungary. Next to me, I have Mr. Frank Arnouds. Frank Arnouds is the senior coordinator at the Belgian Ministry of Foreign Affairs Ambassadors. And for having worked very closely with him, I can say that he was absolutely pivotal in the preparation and the running of the Belgian presidency. So we're going to have a kind of a dialogue between the past Belgian presidency and the acting Hungarian presidency. And of course, I don't have to introduce Professor Pastor again. You will be there to indeed guide us again through your report. One word. We would have liked to complement this panel with a representative of the Commission services. It was not possible for several reasons that I can understand, being a former Commission official myself, and which has to do with the fact that, as I mentioned in my introduction, the institution is in the transition phase for the time being, and that therefore it might have been difficult for a Commission official to express views at the time the College itself will set its agenda. So we'll start with a couple of questions to each of the panelists, and then we'll turn to you for a short Q&A session, 10 to 15 minutes according to the time remaining, so you can already start thinking about a question that you might wish to ask during that last part of our panel. Mr. Schaller-Baross, I will start with you. Ms. von der Leyen, the President of the Commission, delivered a quite impressive speech last week in the plenary of the European Parliament when presenting her new team. What struck me is that the speech was entirely or quasi-exclusively referring to the competitiveness agenda and the famous 3 pillars of the Draghi report, and that the structure of the portfolio was presented in accordance with these 3 pillars, up to a point that I was even struck myself to see that the Belgian commissioner in charge of crisis preparedness was part of the economic security agenda, which is not self-evident when you look at that. But my question to you, as a member of the European Parliament, were you convinced by this presentation? Do you think, are you of the view that the new Commission is indeed equipped to meet the competitiveness challenge? Over to you.
First of all, let me thank you for the possibility to be here in this beautiful and marvelous building, and especially I also want to thank our hosts from Oeconomus and the Egmont Institute. Getting back to the von der Leyen II Commission, you know, if you have a majority, and she definitely had the majority in Parliament, and she is back again, you have to grant her that now she has 5 years to deliver. Of course, she already had 5 years to deliver. And what we see is that what was already in the report of Oeconomus, and if you allow me, I made some of the notes also on the slides, is that we have a major issue around the competitiveness of our continent. And I'm definitely not a politician who will tell you that the European Union needs more integration in most of the fields. But definitely there are some fields on the economical territory, especially after the COVID crisis, that we have to work stronger and especially see that we have different regions inside of the European Union. And there was a slide of friends from Oeconomus, a very good slide about the decline on percentage on exports of Europe on the global market and in the global competition. But on the slide, you never mentioned that in 2002, where the slide begins, we were 14 countries less than today. That means also that basically in 2004, 10 countries, also my country, joined the European Union. The country of my father, Austria, joined in 1995. And then also we got Romania, we got Bulgaria, then we got Croatia, and then we lost the United Kingdom. This means as well that if you globally the slide between 2002 and 2016, and especially then 2020, is that the decline is even bigger than we see on this slide, and that makes us anxious. Especially I'm coming from, and a lot of you are aware, from a small or middle-sized landlocked country inside of the heart of the European Union. The European Common Market was something to aspire for us Hungarians. You have to know that 83% of our exports goes in the direction of the European Common Market. And we always regarded, I never exactly knew if the French were so happy about that situation, but for Germany, the 10 countries that accessed the European Union in 2004 meant that the 900-year-old Central European market was redeveloped inside of the European Union. That meant that without barriers we can trade, we can produce, we can trade with each other. And you have to know that Germany has a bigger trade volume with the Visegrad 4 states than with China or the United States of America. And that's very important because what we see now, and if you want to understand what the people feel in the member states, is that it was unimaginable 5, 6, especially 20 years ago, the German car manufacturers in Germany closing shop. That you lose jobs in the most innovative sector of Europe, the German car manufacturing sector. That's only one symptom, and of course I know that the European economy is far bigger, but for us in Central and Central Eastern Europe, it's a tragedy. Because honestly, the German manufacturing after the Second World War in Western Germany and then in the United Germany was the symbol, the export power of Germany, was the symbol of European competitiveness, of know-how, of developing new technologies. And we see an intensive decline. Why is that? And I know that you, of course I say that to the organizers, you needed a fourth lawyer here today, because I'm a lawyer myself as well. But that should be a pattern, I see. But we made mistakes, and coming back to Ursula von der Leyen's first commission, to go in the direction of the Green Deal was something, honestly, the most important part of the economical policies of the last commission. Was, in my opinion, a mistake, not in the sense that you know, of course, you need green energy. The problem was that you never really got back to the SMEs and the bigger European, Central European and especially German companies. But you see now that we are paying 4 times of the amount for energy that comparable United States enterprises. What we see that we basically lack the possibility to have enough funds to develop. I want to greet Ennek, a friend of mine and colleague from your European Parliament delegation. And she's not a lawyer, she's an economist. So what we see now that it's not only European, especially for us, it's a Central European problem. And I find it, talking about von der Leyen too, I'm a little bit afraid about the sheer fact that now you have, in the face of political nepotism, a green politician sitting by her side, talking about the rebranded Green Deal. And it makes me anxious because when I see these car manufacturers in Germany close shop, losing jobs for Central and Eastern Europe, and also getting back to our export numbers, shrinking that, and then the biggest mistake in the last years for me and for myself was special tariffs on Chinese car manufacturers and especially electronic cars. Because if we want to reach the Green Deal numbers, of course, you have to go, if you started on that street, you have to go further. What happened is that the German car manufacturers asked the German federal government not to vote for the tariff deal because it harms them. So it did not reach, so I don't see the point on it. And I'm very curious if the next Commission will find, especially, and you mentioned it in your opening remarks, that the new United States government will be introduced in January, that we have to talk like adults and to see what their policies will be, and we have to comply. So let's give her the doubt of the benefit, but honestly, I'm a little bit afraid that the Ursula von der Leyen Commission 2 will go on the street of the Ursula von der Leyen Commission 1.
Well, this, sorry, with all due respect for the two other panelists, this would lead me maybe to immediately to a second question that I wanted to ask to you, and then I will turn to Frank Arnaud and you, Professor Pastor. Okay, amongst the 10 or 12 major initiatives which have been announced by the Commission for the 101st days, there is precisely this labeled Clean Industrial Deal, which as such looks prima facie like an endeavor to adapt the Green Deal to situations that were not foreseen and maybe to correct some mistakes that were made. What would be your expectation and what would you like to see in this kind of green industrial, or clean, not green, clean industrial deal or deal?
Yes, but I'm a little bit afraid that we are talking about the rebrand. Going further, but she very well knew in front of Parliament and also before the negotiation to get her commission done, then if you go further with the Green Deal, that you will have the same mistakes, and of course she would have faced political attacks before her election. What's the job of the European Commission in that case? To save jobs. To save jobs and make it possible for the European electorate, the European people, to have safe, clean, and hopefully cheap energy. And also for the European companies, because as I said, it's unnormal that we are in a competition with the United States of America before a Trump administration, and we pay, and our companies pay for 4 times of the amount of energy. And of course, there is a terrible ongoing war in the eastern part of Europe. And we always believed when we joined the European Union that the European Union is a peace project. And that's a very important question. And therefore, we have to get back to be very clear and talk to the people about the sheer fact that it's not normal that we pay so much for energy. We can't compete with these prices. But then I ask myself, is this rebranded Green Deal the best solution to go further? Or we have to face maybe more realistic numbers on that issue?
Okay, thank you very much. Now let me turn to Frank Arnaud. Exactly like the Budapest Declaration was one of the, but certainly the flagship, you say, of the Hungarian presidency. One of the highlights of the Belgian presidency was the presentation of the Letta report. So my question to you was, not as Frank Arnaud, but as a representative of the previous presidency, do you find yourself in the Budapest Declaration Do you find the legacy of the Belgian presidency in President von der Leyen's speech in the European Parliament? Do these two documents meet the expectations of Belgium as a member state and as a former presidency? Over to you.
Thank you, John. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not a lawyer. I'm an Islamologist, so I'm open to revelations and mystery. But also I've been working for 36 years for the Belgian MFA, so this compensates perhaps. And I've been working also on EU and NATO and other issues for a long time. And I was part of the leading team that prepared and managed the Belgian EU presidency. So, and indeed, we're quite happy, we're very happy actually with the Budapest Declaration. And it's also in line with the work that we did during the Belgian presidency, not only during the Belgian presidency, the Spanish presidency, and we had before, well, it started after the full-scale invasion of Russia into Ukraine, and we had the Versailles Declaration, and we had the Granada Declaration, and we had the April European Council conclusions of this year during Belgian presidency on competitiveness, on which the Budapest Declaration is firmly based. So I think the Belgian and the Spanish presidency asked Mr. Letta to write this report on the internal market, and the Commission, in a response to that, asked Mr. Draghi to write his report on competitiveness, being complementary to our internal market report. So I think the analysis is on the table, the recommendations are on the table, the program is there, and you can say that more or less in the Budapest Declaration, all those things come together, the analysis and also the solutions. And it's now indeed for the Commission to come up with its work program and to, especially with its clean industrial deal within 100 days. They will also come in 2025 with their program, the strategy on reinforcing the internal market. There also will be the discussion on the MFF, on the budget. So I think the Polish presidency will be quite busy. So it's, like I said, the analysis and the recipes are on the table. I do not agree that everything, and I also agreed with the analysis of Minister Bóka, but I'm not so pessimistic about this analysis about the institutions. If you evaluate the EU institutions, you should always go back to why did we create the EU and the European community in the first place. It is because we wanted to create peace and stability in Europe by creating shared interests, first between Germany and France and then between the rest of Europe, to stabilize Europe. And I think if looking back at that, to the history since 1945 till now, I think you can say that we have been successful in having peace within the EU, and we created prosperity, and I think you can say that the EU is still the most prosperous region in the world, where the difference between the highest and the lowest income is the smallest in the world. And so I think as a societal project, the EU is a big success, and its institutions has proven their success. What we see now, I think, is a certain, not a certain, I think it is a complacency. I think, like the minister also said, that we think that this will be forever. If we don't get our act together, it will not be forever. And I think definitely our public opinion, and also to a large extent, I think our political leaders have not come to this realization yet of this sense of urgency. And I think the speeches and also the Budapest Declaration is full of sense of urgency and so on. But when I see that only 1 or 2 weeks after the Budapest Declaration in the Competition Council, we didn't manage to find an agreement on Council conclusions on competitiveness, because Germany, Austria and France could not come to an agreement on how to deal with nuclear energy. I know nuclear energy is a key issue on the energy future of Europe, but But I think it proves that the sense of urgency is not there, that we have to stumble about this issue that exists for decades, not to come to council conclusions as follow-up to the Budapest Declaration on how we should work on competitiveness. I don't know, you have to stop me for time management.
We have to.
So for me, this is the first thing. We can look at the Commission, we can look at the speeches of Madame van der Leyen and so on, but I think the EU has been created by the member states, and it's the responsibility of the member states to make the EU a success. Yes, the Commission has the right of initiative, but the EU is made by the member states, and what I see at this moment is that we have more and more member states which are not convinced that the EU serves their interest. Perhaps they still believe that it serves their common interest, but they do not, and I see an increasing number of member states which are not really sure that the EU serves their national interest and the interest of their citizens. They fall back on themselves. And this is probably, if we want to maintain ourselves, if we want to be strong and agile in the world and competitive, we have to do this together. If we are shrinking, if our relative weight in the world is shrinking, it's not good to fall back on ourselves, member state by member state, and think we can do this on our own. We have to work together. And this is what we have to do. We need more Europe and not less Europe. Yes, and this more Europe, that has to help us to become more competitive, has to become a simpler Europe. And there I agree. There's this whole prioritization on reducing minister burden, reporting obligation to be reduced by 25% and so on. If we want to create a legitimate Europe for citizens and companies, yes. If we want more Europe, then at the same time we have to simplify it. And if we have to be stronger, perhaps on fewer issues, to prioritize. Indeed, I can agree with that. But we have to be stronger and doing more at the European level.
Thank you, Frank. We shall come back on that in a second, but I would like now to turn to you, Professor Pastor. There have been, dozens of references in our conversation until now to the Draghi and Letta report, and so does your extremely well-documented report. I would really recommend reading to all of you, even those who are not economists by training, to read that report. But I would like maybe to tease you on one point. Do you feel entirely comfortable with the conclusions and the recommendation of these two reports, Letta or Draghi? I remember in the beginning of your presentation, you recalled what your professor told you when you were studying economy at the university, that, they will help you to better understand where economists are cheating and where they are showing the right way. So, are there some chapters, section, recommendation of this report with which you are not entirely comfortable, and if so, for what reasons?
Thank you so much. Something personal. As an economist, I was happy to read these reports, and there are two versions in case of the Draghi report. There is a shorter one, if I'm not mistaken, it is like 69 page. The report is like 69 page, and the longer one is close to 400 or 300 or 60 something. I can't remember. And I have to say that this report and the Letta report also is an elaborate piece of work. They gathered much information, highly relevant information. And when teaching the university students, I always tell them that at least we have a clear picture and a well-documented set of problems. So reading these documents is highly recommended for everyone. And problems emerge when we have a look at the recommendations. And I'm not blackening Mario Draghi, for example, because he is already in the textbooks. When we talk about the euro crisis, and when he said that we are going to do everything to save the euro. So his name is already in the textbooks. I'm just saying that some of the recommendations are not new, And when it comes to, for example, using credit or turning to credits to finance innovation and, well, move forward, when we are talking about this point, I have to say that some member states or some member countries will never agree. And this is a joint, or this would be a joint project. And according to this piece of recommendation, credit should be used to finance research and development and innovation. Some member countries would be happy with this. Some others say that no, we are not going to join this. And this piece appeared in the business news almost immediately. And I have to say that, well, this will never happen. I think this will never happen. And when browsing the other recommendations, I had the feeling that I have heard about them already. And many have the feeling that they are not completely new, and some colleagues or experts went so far where that they said that actually we may find this on the internet when browsing the previous reports and when browsing the previous recommendations. That is something what I really like. Draghi is talking about developing a competitive advantage in green energies and green technologies. I think, yes, there is a comparative advantage in that, but he warns that things can go wrong when there is much green transition. Things can go wrong when at the input side, companies will remain uncompetitive because they have huge energy prices. And I really liked when he emphasized the fact that we have to be cautious with green technologies and green energy and the green transition, because this can give Europe a competitive advantage, but things can go wrong easily. What else? Basically, education, training, skills improvement are important keywords. But let me tell you that it would be better to see more young entrepreneurs. I am teaching close to 300 university students every year, and only 1 out of 10 wants to become an entrepreneur. It is good because they can find good employment, and we may say at the same time this is bad because they completely miss entrepreneurial skills. And when I go to emerging markets, they usually say that I will be employed when I create a job for myself. Employment is not available, and it would be great to not only emphasize skills education, but somehow improve the entrepreneurial spirit.
So again, I mean, before turning to Mr. Schaller and Frank Arnaud for the final question, I would like maybe you to elaborate a little bit following what you just said about one of the contribution of your report you did not have time to highlight in your presentation, and that's the innovation gap, which is also one of the 3 pillars of the Draghi report. Clearly, we are lagging behind in terms of innovation, and productivity is declining. What would be your main recommendation? A few words, a few sentences. I know that nothing is always that simple. That's Einstein, which says once that we make things simple but simpler than they are. But when it comes to innovation and productivity, what would be your main recommendation to the incoming European leadership, whether they are member states or institutions?
If I have a sentence only, but if you don't mind, I will add a couple of more sentences. I would say that we have some innovations, but those rarely enter the markets, and they remain isolated. And an old story comes to my mind. Someone at the university told me that, in the Soviet Union, they had good innovations in the defense industry, but those innovations never entered the market. in the US. They have excellent innovations in space technology, also in the military. And those innovations entered the markets. We don't have to go far for examples, GPS, internet, and we may continue the list. And well, first we should tackle the bureaucratic burden. Many young entrepreneurs are dissuaded from dealing with patents, dealing with innovations. Once they have a good idea, they don't have money. Venture capital is not available. When there is a good idea, many early stage companies go to the US because they find much better financing conditions. And that's a disaster, I have to say. So, well, after one sentence, if you want me to highlight two words, I would say that entrepreneurial spirit, less bureaucracy, less red tape, and better financing.
Thank you for that. Turning to you, Mr. Schaller-Baross, and a little bit in line with what Frank Arnault said in his previous intervention, better together than on our own. There is a concern related to the competitiveness one, which is the one of economic security. I mean, it's a key question. It has to do with supply chains, it has to do with trade relations, it has to do with screening of investments, and so on and so forth. Okay, how do you think that this should be approached? What kind of measures should you think in your mind should be promoted at EU level in view of reinforcing the economic security? I refer also to what you said yourself, the importance of internal trade within the Union, which is another indication that, well, at least to the modest opinion of a non-economist, economic security is a challenge that should be better tackled by the EU collectively, or at least the 27 member states collectively, than member states individually. Over to you.
Thank you for the questions. First of all, we have to get back to use the term Europe first. We heard that a lot on the other side of the pond, and I don't think that America first sentence in itself is bad. But we have to we live in Europe, we are citizens of European member states, so let's get back to the term Europe first and made in Europe. Because what we see now is that we are exporting our innovation to our competitors. And what we also see that the finance and the capital investments to the SMEs and also to startups on this continent are not the startups are not well financed, because venture capital is not present compared to the United States, and what we see as well is that we use commercial banks for financing our companies. So that means that a lot of innovation, also startups, are moving on the other side of the ocean. What we see as well in the question of patents, is it normal that 60% of all the patents globally are coming from China, and that Korea has more patents than the European Union? We talked about European industry, already talked about the European car industry, especially the German car industry. We already talked about that Hungary, my country, as I said, a mid-sized country, 10 million inhabitants, landlocked. What's very important is that when we see the energy question, and you see that Hungary, I don't know if you are aware, that Hungary is the one country outside of the big players, so Germany, China and the United States, that the three big premium German auto car manufacturers, so Mercedes, BMW and Audi, are producing. That means as well, for us, the question of energy is a question of survival. The Hungarian government did build interconnectors to all the neighboring countries we have, but we still have no sea, so we are very much dependent on our neighbor countries to give us energy on a normal scale price. Then we talk about made in Europe, European innovation, we talk about defense policy, we have a war in Europe ongoing. What is the Hungarian government doing? And I think it's a good approach. We buy made in Europe. We have a common project with Airbus helicopters, we have a common project with Saab, the Gripen planes, we have a common project with Rheinmetall. Rheinmetall, Hungary is after Germany now the second largest producing place and also innovative place for Rheinmetall, because we need to get back these crucial manufacturing companies to Europe, outside, especially from bring them back from Asia. So what we need from the clean industrial deal is protect the jobs, protect the companies, protect the European companies, bring the know-how back, and made it possible for young entrepreneurs and startups to start the shop here in Europe and not to leave the continent. Yes, I think in the short term that's it.
Thank you very much. And well, final question before we turn to the audience, to Ambassador Arnold. All of you did refer to the need for simplification, debureaucratization, deregulation. You are an official. In another life, I used to be one of the person that you like to hate, that's to say, European bureaucrat. Do you really believe in this, slogan of simplification and deregulation? How is it achievable? What would be the priority? This target of 25%, you quoted it yourself, how and what would you recommend? What would be the starting point? Where should the EU start in view of reaching tangible outcome? Because if there is a goal which which will be easy to assess, it's that.
But it has to be done. If you look at the EU, if you look at the absolute figures of available state aid, for instance, if you look at all the budgets to support research in Europe, and all the recovery funds, and if you take together all this money, it's not less than the IRA in the United States. The needs, but if you look at the same time at the problems we have just spending this money, like the recovery fund post-COVID, there's still a lot of unspent money there. So it's not a solution to have more regulations, to create new funds and all those things, if it's too complicated to use them. So I think we agree on that. So it has to happen. How it exactly has to happen, I think it's very challenging. I've been environmental attaché for Belgium with the permanent representation for 5 years. I've negotiated environmental legislation for 5 years, new legislation reviews and so on, to review legislation and to take all the reporting obligation, all the review clauses and so on out. It's a new legislative process in many cases. Probably there are quick wins, and I think that the Commission has committed itself to look at this to really reach this 25%. I'm not a technician, I would not come up with real recommendation, but I know it will be an uphill battle, and it will definitely not be easy to do that. In connection to that, we talked a lot about the clean industrial deal and how it relates to the Green Deal, which is seen as, and I think rightly so, adding in a new big layer of new regulation, new obligations, and so on. First of all, we have to say they have not just been invented, all those new regulations, to annoy our business community, to annoy our citizens. They have been negotiated by the member states for good reasons, because there was a pressing urgency, which is climate change. I think probably the error or the mistake that was done is that, and there was a sense of urgency, and there was a lot of political pressure, and there was the right political majority at the right moment. I think this agenda was pushed through at a high speed. And probably not all the impact assessments which were needed at the moment, the 360 degrees impact assessments, which should be a guarantee for coherence, were not respected, and it was pushed through as a necessary, and I underline as a necessary, but also probably slightly too much politically pushed agenda, without taking enough account of the interest of the citizens, to make sure that was also a just transition, and also not taking enough into account the obstacles it could raise for the business community. But it was necessary, and I think we should be proud about the Green Deal. But there have been made mistakes and there was too much extra regulation probably. So what we need is a correction. What we should definitely not do is to only focus now on competitiveness and replace one-sided policy by another one-sided policy, and we very soon will discover that this will create new problems, that we will not have a level playing field afterwards. Because why do we have environmental and social legislation in Europe? It's because it's part of creating a level playing field, including for our business communities, to avoid that you have unfair competition between member states using or misusing strong or weak environmental legislation, strong or weak social legislation. So we just don't invent social legislation or environmental legislation to annoy the business community. It's just to reinforce the level playing field, to have better competition. I think we went overboard. We created too many rules. We have to reduce it. We have to do it in an intelligent way and definitely in a coherent way. And I think the most sustainable way of doing it is at the level of policy conception. And so if for the future we develop new legislation, that we do full 360 degrees impact assessment, and not only a smaller medium-sized business check, or only a competitive check, but we need to do a comprehensive, coherent impact assessment. But otherwise we will repeat in a different way the same mistakes as we did during the Green Deal. So one-sidedness, only focusing on competitiveness, will not be the solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank. The time has now come to pass to the Q&A session with the audience. We are slightly behind schedule, but with the permission of the organizers, we'll go a little bit over the 7 o'clock tonight, 7 o'clock deadline that was set. We know that we are the last obstacle between you and the reception, but nevertheless. So please raise your hand. I see one hand. I would ask you, I will take 3 questions at a time as usual. So we have 3 persons in the back of the room, and I will ask you each time to introduce yourself and to say to which of the panelists you are addressing your question. And I will ask you, as usual, to be as brief and short and to the point as possible. Over to you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Schaller-Baross. I'm an SME to the European Commission. My question is very broadly to everyone, but if to be addressed then to Szabolcs Pastor maybe, and that is that we have seen in the past energy price-fueled eurosclerosis in the 70s based on the Arab oil crisis. That has spurred into a competitiveness issue of the, at that time, forming European Union. My question is broadly, are there any implications from that energy spiraled competitiveness crisis, and what can be deducted from that? Is there something to learn from to the current competitiveness crisis, which is also kind of started with an energy, even if we disregard the fact that it started 15 years ago? But thank you.
Thank you very much. The gentleman in the back, standing in the back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, citizens. My name is Angelos Harlaftis. We represent here the Urania and Helios Space and Defense Group, a pan-European and Mediterranean group. I have 3 questions. One question is, do you really think that the Draghi report, which is an excellent from a technical point of view, can be used without indebting more the citizens? Because he needs 800 billion, I believe 1 trillion at the end of the day. And also we are not, do you think that the money are going to be invested in an efficient way? Because of the last credit lines, we didn't invest it very efficiently. Second question is, do you think that making questions is so an easy word on the back of the citizens? Because the administrations of after 70s, with the golden standard, which they followed the American policies and the Chinese, they opened the Chinese market and they deindustrialized the European lands, and the administration, they didn't pay anything. The citizens are paying still today. So the third question is, how are we going to make the competitiveness? The morning I was at the meeting with the European Union, trade union associations. We were discussing about the industrial wind sector, and we have we need around 300,000 experts, workers. Where are we going to find them? The Greeks, the government, they need for the construction 300,000 workers, and they want to import them from India. When in Europe, we have a lot of unemployment. So there are very things which these administrations, they cannot compete in the way they are thinking. Thank you very much.
And the gentleman there.
Nicolas de Sadler, full professor, UCL Louvain. Maybe I'll start with two observations. First observation, the difficulties faced by the German car manufacturers is also a problem for Brussels regions, given that the main factory in town closed and laid off 5,000 workers and have huge impacts upon subcontractors, on something like 12,000 to 15,000 subcontractors. Second remark, the high energy price, and seems to me that Draghi report is clear on the matter, is not a result of the new package of legislations falling within the Green Deal, but it has been mostly the upshot of the confrontation in Ukraine. My question, according to Article 17 of the Treaty on the European Union, the European Commission is deemed to defend the general EU interest. And as you're aware, the interest is composed of manifold facets. In particular, regarding Article 3, paragraph 3 of the treaty, the Union is aiming at building the internal market, and besides, as achieving sustainable development that's reckoning upon three pillars: economic growth, social prosperity, as well as a high level of environment. So the fact of focusing exclusively in a time of major climate crisis on the competitiveness, is it consistent with the basic provisions of the Treaty of the European Union?
Thank you very much for these three first questions. Professor Pastor, I have the feeling that many of them were directed to you. So why don't you start, and then I will turn to the two other panelists.
Okay. I'm debating in my mind to answer the first, then later we can move to the next ones. The first was related to economic history, in short I can say, because that question reminded us to the importance of economic history. And let's go back in time. The Marshall Plan was not only about giving money, but it was about exporting American technologies to the European continent. And it was about using those technologies in the European industries. Economic history books say that by the 1970s, those technologies were becoming slowly but steadily obsolete, and the Europeans were not up to the job of improving those technologies. And then came the crude oil shocks, and it became visible that inside and outside of Europe, technological changes will be needed, and much technological improvement was needed. So I think this is one important conclusion we have to draw. So from time to time, we need new technologies, and external shocks may remind us that we need disrupting technologies and new technologies. And personally, I say that comparing the two periods is a good idea, but at the same time, we cannot compare the two because at that time, the world economy was quite different. We have to be cautious with comparisons, and I'm really happy about talking about economic history, and I say that what we have to learn in this case is the advance of technology, or the level of technological preparedness, and how and when we have to handle technological changes.
Thank you. I would say, okay, there were three topics broadly in the other question. I mean, financial sustainability. Where do we find the money? The second question, maybe we could go back to you, was about the skills. Where do we find the manpower? And the third question was about the compatibility between the competitiveness agenda and the sustainable development goals. So maybe Frank and then Mr. Schaller, yourself.
Yes, thank you. I think I already partly replied to the question of Professor de Sadele on how to reconcile sustainability with competitiveness. I think that European political leaders and the Commission, compared, for instance, to Chinese or US leaders, have a much more challenging task, because we have to tick much more boxes, and I think the US and definitely in China they can prioritize much easier. But in the EU, yes, and I don't want to be misunderstood on that. I think for the coming 5 years, with the incoming Commission, security and competitiveness will be the priority, and I think there's a consensus on that among everybody. But because of the setup of the EU and also because of the expectations of EU citizens, what they want to get out of the EU, it's much more than just that the EU is safe and competitiveness. They also want clean air, they want clean water, they want a good distribution of income, and so on and so on. So that we have a good rule of law, open and diverse, democratic society, and all this has a price. And also that we serve the climate goals, that we serve the sustainability goals, and this is all those things that the EU citizen, rightly so, expects from the EU and also from authorities and the authorities of the member states. But this makes it extremely demanding for our leaders to tick all those boxes, but they have to be ticked, all of them. And I think for the moment we have to prioritize competitiveness, otherwise indeed we will lose our competitive position in the world. But how to do it? And I think there we need to rethink the role of the state, the role of society. I think Madame van der Leyen, she spoke about more statecraft, about an economic foreign policy, about strategic autonomy. I think we still have a very strong belief, and for good reasons, in an open global market and so on, but unfortunately it doesn't exist anymore. So we have to work on the strategic autonomy. We have to keep it as open strategic autonomy as possible. We have to work on economic security, but this will change the modus operandi of our business community and a lot, and it also will probably reinforce the role of the state, and I don't know if we are all ready for that and doing that. So we have to tick all the boxes, but also we have to shift priorities, and it will be very demanding at the moment where the political landscape is very unstable, both but definitely at the level of the member states. We have now a new commission and a new president of the council. Let's hope that they will bring some peace and definitely political stability, and hopefully new leadership, so that we can get our act together and that we really act on this sense of urgency. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't know what's the biggest or the bigger mistake, to invite a lawyer to this panel or to invite a politician to this panel, but and both, and somebody mentioned the 800 billion what Mr. Draghi would need for his plans, and we're talking about how the European Union spend some funds we already know, like the recovery fund. I'm a little skeptical about that, but please tell me if I'm wrong, but I think 41% of the funds were already used by the member state, and especially in my member states the funds are not open, but the fun part is that the Hungarian children, my children and grandchildren, will pay back the interest, so I'm very curious when this will change. And secondly, we have to be a little bit more open, because we talked about the sheer fact that we have to bring production, especially development, back to this continent. But at the same time, let's be open. So if we develop a German or French car, if you wish, develop it and then manufacture it in the Czech Republic or Hungary, you have the development, you have the process here in Europe, but at the same time, if you need a battery for that, let's bring in the Korean or if you wish Chinese manufacturers to produce the batteries here in this continent and to build good cars for European citizens that is affordable, that we can proceed. That would be idea. What the problem is, sometimes I see in this kind of question a little bit too much of politics, and I think the good solution would be to be a little bit more open because Europe, let's be a melting pot, let's be a meeting place of global technology. That would be a good idea.
Thank you very much. I would take two final questions if there are any. So raise your hand. Yes, I see one. Chance for a second one? No? Okay, then you will have the last question. Please.
Very honored. Thank you very much. Xu Dong from China Mission to the EU. I'm not a lawyer, so it seems that everyone has to identify his occupational status, so no legal questions, just two economic issues. One is a supplement to the funding issue. So I just want to know your take on the suggestion of continuing the common euro bond project in the future to fund competitiveness, as suggested by the report of Mr. Draghi. And the second issue is about the regional cohesion, how to make sure that every member state can get benefits from the competitive initiative or strategy issued by the von der Leyen 2.0, or in other words, how to avoid new regional imbalances created in the competitive initiative. As we have heard that there's a recommendation saying that if there is no agreement among the member countries, some like-minded member countries can establish an intergovernmental agreement or establish an involuntary alliance to go first with the competitive strategy. What's your take on that? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, okay, I will now turn to the three panelists, starting with Professor Pastor, moving to Frank Arnault, and then to you, Mr. Schaller-Baross. Okay, I think that there were two relatively fundamental questions, so you might wish to answer these questions, but at the same time, I will ask you to, in a way, conclude with your takeaway of the debate tonight, your main takeaway of the debate tonight. Professor Pastor.
Yeah, when we mention bond markets, I have to say that I have a high opinion on them. Let me tell you why. In those countries where the bond market is alive and kicking, there is always an anchor on inflation. If you buy, for example, a corporate bond, 20% will be written on that. And those buy bonds who are financially literate, and they may belong to the decision makers of that country, and they will be in favor of reducing the inflation rate, in order to benefit from that corporate bond. So this is my personal opinion, and basically this is what textbooks say. And when it comes to funding, I think turning to the capital markets, turning to the bond markets is not a bad idea. And this is how the European Union gets the necessary resources. The European Union is attractive for many, and basically many are ready to provide the necessary funds. And well, it worked, let's say, so beautifully. Of course, these things come with an interest rate. We have to pay, or our children or grandchildren have to pay. But basically, this is a modern and good form of financing. When it comes to, if I may continue, regional policy, I have to tell you that there used to be regional disparities in the European integration. There are regional disparities in the European integration across countries, within countries. And I truly hope that these disparities will be handled in the future as well. We talked about competitiveness, and I'm saying that when there are huge regional disparities, it may lead to lost competitiveness, or it may lead to losing competitiveness. Let me tell you an example, and this comes from regional sciences and economic science focusing on regions. When in an exact region, or when in an exact city, a lot of people live and work, economists use a word, congestion, And well, roads are full of cars, flat prices are increasing, wages are increasing also. That region or that exact city will lose competitiveness in comparison with other regions and other cities. When there are not so visible differences, then we can say that regions and cities will remain equally competitive. So we have to be really cautious with the regional distribution of income, economic growth, and so on and so on and so on.
Thank you very much. Turning to you, Mr. Arnold.
Yes, thank you. When Charles Michel was, I think, in 2023, he said that we should be ready for enlargement by 2030. That sent quite a shockwave through the EU, and he said not only the candidate member states have to be ready for it, but also the member states themselves to accept those new member states. So then there was this whole push for reform. We needed to reform, we needed to think about the future of Europe, and then we had the German-French paper coming up with a treaty reform and so on. Then the Belgian presidency was mandated to deal with that issue about the future of Europe. We were asked to make a kind of roadmap on that. And then we found out with the member states that the appetite, after all, was not so big for reform. And then we came to the conclusion that if we want to advance the EU, we first have to focus on policies. What do we want to do together? Then next steps, how do we finance what we want to do together? And then as a third step, then we can see how can we improve the working methods of the EU. We call that how to improve the governance. And so this is not the same level of ambition as treaty reform. I think we need a treaty reform, but not very soon, because the political landscape is not there for that. So I think what we have been done now during the Spanish, Belgian, and also the Hungarian presidency, with the focus on competitiveness and also the strategic agenda, the political guidelines from Madame Ursula von der Leyen. I think we have quite a good idea what we want to do together, what are the policies. So I think we established that, and also we established a sense of urgency. Now the next discussion is on how to finance it, and that will be now not only the multi-annual financial framework that we will start to discuss through the Polish presidency, but probably there are more urgent issues to deal with as well, and whether we should go back to the system of bonds or others. For the moment, I think every civil servant in every member state is under instruction not to preempt the discussion that we will have on the MFF and on. But I think we have to be creative, we have to need an open mind, we have to keep all the options open, whether it will be new own resources, whether it will be an increase of the budget more than 1% of GDP, and so on. So if we think that we need more Europe, and if we transfer more responsibilities from the member states to Europe, we need money for that. That's simple. But how to do that, that remains to be seen. And so I leave that question open, but it has to be done, and we'll have to settle that not only during the Polish presidency, but also afterwards. And then also at the same time we will discuss the governance issue, and if we talk about better regulation, for me this is already talking about governance, how to make better rules, how to implement, to take care of enforcement, but also of enforceability of new measures. So this also is a process already ongoing, but I'm afraid we have to do all those things at the same time. Thank you.
I was once told that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so it's better to listen than to speak. And especially I know that everybody has a buffet waiting for them. But if you allow me, my takeaway from today is that you need more Europe. Only at that places where it's really needed. And for instance, advancing the internal market is one of them. And especially, and secondly, so that would be my takeaway. And secondly, the question on the Eurobonds is, it's not my opinion that matters, but let's take a deep look at the German Constitutional Court in Karlsruhe and what's the opinion of the biggest member state of Europe on that question. And I think that's the most important part in that matter. Thank you so much.
I will thank all the panelists on behalf of the audience in just a second. I'm very glad about what was said during this last round, because I was fearing that the last part of the minister's speech was this rather provocative thinking about, the structure or the architecture of the Union would be left unanswered. What I might myself have been a European bureaucrat, as I said earlier, but surprisingly, what he said resonated a lot with me, because I was there when the Lisbon strategy was implemented. I was there when the EU 2020 strategy was implemented. I was inside the machinery when they're implemented, and it was very obvious that the machinery was much too heavy to lead anywhere. This being said, it has also to do with the commitment of the member states themselves. This remains a crucial problem. They decide one thing on day one, and on day two they do different things, or they don't deliver on what they have decided. So I think that you are absolutely right, Frank, to say that there is no appetite whatsoever amongst member states to engage into anything which would look like a treaty change today. But we goddamn need a deep reflection about the governance of the EU, and reform can be implemented while leaving the treaty absolutely untouched. And that should be part of the agenda which is coming on, which is now being unfolded, because if we don't do that, we are not going to collectively deliver. My second point would be that I was really struck by what came out of the question. We have grand plans concerning competitiveness, economic security, reinvigorating European industry, but when the question comes, where's the money? Where's the manpower? We don't have the answers. We don't have the answers. So we better start thinking very quickly about that. I would stop here by, first of all, thanking all of you for having joined us tonight and still being with us. But of course, there is a reception, and we know that Hungary knows what hospitality means, so we all know that. But I want also to thank very warmly, first of all, Oeconomus and you, Professor Pastor, for the report which fed into the discussion tonight. I want to thank all the three of you, the other two panelists, for your outstanding contribution. And I want to come back again thanking the Hungarian House for this hospitality. I think that all of you need a big round of applause on behalf of the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think it was a great panel. I enjoyed it myself very much. I hope you enjoyed it too. I would like to thank Egmont Institute for the cooperation on the event. I think it was a really fruitful cooperation. And I would like to say thankful words to Hungarian House in Brussels and the colleagues of the House to help organize the event and for the venue. Please give them a big applause.